I trust you, but I am going to keep my clothes on. I'm here tonight representing a generation of lost boys. Lost because the modern man is having an identity crisis. Tonight I'm going to tell you a little bit of my own story about my own personal crisis of identity and about my journey to find a new man for the new century. In doing this, I want us to be able to have a conversation about this. This is me in high school. It was pretty cool. I liked tight-fitting t-shirts and Converse All-Stars, and I had these sweet gas station sunglasses that I liked because they reminded me of John Lennon. My story takes place in my senior year of high school and begins, as all great stories do, with mutiny. Specifically an academic mutiny occasioned by our reading of The Awakening by Kate Chopin. For those of you unfamiliar with the plot, I'll give a brief synopsis. This book concerns itself with the adventures of a middle-class married woman of the turn of the century. While on vacation with her family, she finds the comfortable life she's been leading to be overwhelming and suffocating, so she rebels and engages in various affairs with various men about town, eventually throwing herself naked into the sea in a fit of despair and self-discovery. This wasn't our favorite book that we studied this year. The class, but especially my friends and I, we were not taken with it at all. We sympathized with the poor husband who, through no fault of his own, can no longer please his wife, who, while he's off earning money for the family, she's out sleeping with the local gentry and streaking about town. We sympathized with him because we saw in him a kind of Mr. Cellophane. We sympathized with him because we saw in ourselves a kind of Mr. Cellophane. Not that our plights were at all similar. We didn't have girlfriends at the time, but it wasn't too much to imagine that if we did, they would engage in similar behavior with some unworthy classmate. Our commentaries to this effect were met with mixed reviews. We were accused of being unsympathetic to her plight, of being selfish, even of being sexists, which was hard to take. We were at the end of high school. We'd survived the awkward growing phase, the awkward voice-changing phase, the awkward I don't really know how to handle myself around people phase. To overcome all of that and to be labeled sexists by the women we were trying to impress was a little too much. We were men and not sexists. There was an important difference, and we sought to defend ourselves. However, to make a defense of manliness, we had to have some kind of working definition of what that meant. So we went where any self-respecting 17-year-old teenage boys would go to find their example of manliness. We perused our library of John Wayne and James Bond movies. However, upon closer examination of these films, we found certain traits that they exhibited that, if we were to exhibit, wouldn't get us very far in our cause. We chose instead to take a less controversial warrior poet route. We tried to improve our scholarship, not necessarily by doing better in school. My friend always said, never let school get in the way of your education. We tried to do things that we thought maybe scholars and sages would do. We carried around notebooks filled with witticisms and cultural critiques. We widened our cultural knowledge we watched classic movies. We refined our taste in root beer. We tried to be better around women. We were copious door openers. We also tried to sharpen the warrior half of our new persona by engaging with our enemy as often as possible, ironically enough being those same women we were trying to impress. The culmination of this was the issue of man cards. I still have mine. This came to symbolize kind of all the intangible things that we were trying to develop in ourselves, all of these things that we were trying to identify. We wrote up a complicated manifesto, pun intended, to go along with the cards, outlining all of these qualities and things that we were looking for. Like all great historical documents, it was handwritten. Unfortunately, it has been lost to the sands of time. We think it was stolen by our enemies. High school ended with the original cause of our mutiny long forgotten. And notwithstanding how much I really didn't like this book, it kind of started my own awakening. And this struggle to find an applicable manliness kind of haunted me. A couple of years before, my father passed away, and I missed him a lot, and I still do. I had a lot of questions, a lot of unresolved, unanswered questions about all the things that guys just do that they don't teach you how to do in school, about dating girls, about being a grown-up, all of these things. I felt like I didn't have anywhere I could go to learn about that, to figure that out. I looked around to try and find some kind of an authentic model, anything out there, but I couldn't. I think this authentic model doesn't exist in society today. I think it used to. We used to have kind of just this received cultural understanding about what men were, what being manly meant. We don't anymore. We have our own conceptions about masculinity, but most of these are outdated. They're out of touch. They're insensitive, even androcentric. Lots of them are the qualities that we're trying to get out of men instead of encouraging them. Lots of chauvinistic things. There are those that say that an authentic model isn't even necessary anymore. Gender is just a cultural construct. We can't just assign people roles based on their gender. That's fine. I'm not saying we have to, but I do think we need to have some kind of expectation, something positive to shoot for, because without this, the results haven't been particularly encouraging. You probably are familiar with some of these. When I was in high school, I was 30% more likely to drop out than any of the girls in my class. Now that I'm in college, I'm 10% less likely to finish. That goes for grad school as well. Men are less and less proficient in the world of romance. We can't, it's harder for them to make a meaningful relationship with a woman. Men's wages are on a downward slope. In fact, there was a study released in major cities. Single women can make more than single men with comparable job. We have created for ourselves a generation of lost boys. And these lost boys not only need their mothers, but they need some kind of a father as well. Of course, the easy culprit for all of this is those darn feminists. But I don't think the feminist movement has anything to do with this. The feminist movement, in many respects, was a reaction to changing cultural and social conditions. Women have done a very remarkable job of reinventing themselves for the modern era, of redefining who they are. Men had the same opportunity and didn't do anything. There was never a modern role defined, and we're paying the price. We need to find a solution for this lapse in contemporary masculinity. My solution was the New Century Man. In 2010, I was out of high school. I was living outside the country. I was on my own. I was living in a culture that I didn't understand and didn't feel that I was a part of. I had a lot of time to think. And I thought about myself. I thought about who I was, about who I wanted to be, what kind of a man I wanted to become. I was an adult, but I didn't feel like I was a grown-up. I felt like I'd missed something along the way. The New Century Man was my answer to all of this. In formulating him, I kind of assumed that all of our cultural advances in the past 20, 30, 40 years were not so much advances as mistakes, as things that didn't need to happen. So I kind of pretended like those years didn't happen. Instead, I kind of imagined what could have been, what should have been, in formulating who the man is, how he should have already developed now. I think I initially envisioned him as being some kind of revolutionary, universal, culture-changing character, but I quickly realized that he was more about me than anything else. I was trying to identify these universal manly ideals that everyone could adopt, but instead I was just identifying the things I wanted to see in myself. So, over a period of a couple of weeks, in a fit of despair and self-discovery, I wrote a new manifesto. I have the original copy here, handwritten, like all great historical documents are. It outlines just basic guidelines about who I envisioned the new century man to be. Going from outside in, the visual reflects the internal. What you see is how I am on the inside. I talk about physical appearance from page 2. The new century man desires to present his best and truest self, regardless of the environment. This is accomplished with refinement and carefulness, not the looseness and overt casualness that prevail today. I think the new century man should look sharp, not because he's vain or concerned about his appearance. He just wants to present who he really is. There's also kind of a practical side to this. Manliness is not synonymous with slovenliness or laziness. And if you don't want to be a slob, don't dress like one. Grander than that, though, overarching, I want the new century man to continue the art of style and personal presentation that we've cultivated and refined through the centuries, but have kind of recently forgot about. This from page 1. Men now, generally speaking, tend to be quite utilitarian in nature. They're increasingly aesthetically, philosophically, academically, socially, and intellectually unaware, and have none of the refinement and dignity that was expected in civilization in the decades of yesteryear. I think the new century man is the modern gentleman, kind of the continuation of that classic landowning, propertied, gentleman of refinement, without all of those landowning, well-propertied characteristics necessarily. It's more of an internal thing. The new century man will open a door for a woman, not because he thinks that she can't do it for herself or that she needs his help to get along, but out of respect. The new century man is well-mannered, he's well-spoken, he's civil. From page 3. The new century man can be described as a classic modern and should have more classic manners. Some would call it being old-fashioned, but really this is being timeless. He is at all times respectful. Never should a man be a user or manipulator of things, people, or situations. He should be graceful yet powerful in thought and action. The new century man is also well-educated. He doesn't have to be a PhD, but he needs to know what he knows well. The new century man is emotionally literate. He can talk about himself. He's not some callous brute or an isolated stoic. He can communicate himself. He can divulge himself to other people. The new century man is strong in his principles, more than strong in physical strength. He believes in what he believes in, and if necessary, he will stand up and fight for those. This is a quick overview of a complicated thing. Taken from page 5, basically, the new century man knows himself and seeks to both develop and preserve that self with his actions, his thoughts, and his pursuits. I wrote this almost 3 years ago, and it's undergone some revisions, obviously. This is me now. Sometimes I still wear tight-fitting t-shirts, but I do have a different pair of gas station sunglasses. I have not reached where the new century man confidently stands. I think if I had achieved what I wrote in the manifesto, I wouldn't have written very much to achieve. I guess the most important part about self-discovery is knowing that you have something in yourself worth discovering. Men especially. You are more than you think you are, and you are certainly more than society has framed you to be. This is a conversation that we need to have. We need to solve the modern man's identity crisis. Whether it be some grand cultural overhaul or just retuning our own personal manifestos. We can do better for each other. This is just my idea, my new century man. What about yours?